It's my great pleasure to introduce and welcome Ms. Samantha Kris.
Okay, so I gotta say, when I first found out that I was at 4:45, I was like, shoot, everyone's gonna be so tired. This is the end of the day, but then talk about manifestation and mindset. We've been talking a lot about that today. I thought, what a great opportunity to take everything that we've learned and put it into action. So yes, I'm gonna be speaking, but so are you. This is a public speaking workshop, so it will be interactive, and just by show of hands, who's interested in public speaking? And don't take my feelings into account. Okay, who's not interested? Just a couple hands? Great. You're gonna get a ton of value out of this anyway, I promise. In fact, you probably need this more than anyone. So for the ones who don't love it, take notes, because this is something that will be incredibly valuable for your business. Storytelling has been a huge theme today. We've heard a lot about how to tell great stories. We've heard from a lot of great storytellers. We're going to talk about storifying your impact, because whether you intend to speak publicly or not, you have a responsibility to share the story of your business. And there are ways which we can apply today to make sure that you walk out of Unite 2025 a better, more impactful leader, so that come Unite 2026, will it still be called Unite next year? Does the name change? Anyway, when we're back next year, we'll have more impact stories to tell. So let me just kind of orient myself here. Who has experience with public speaking? Okay, a good amount. So we've bought into the narrative that public speaking is valuable, that it's necessary. Do we know how much money is left on the table when we opt out of taking these opportunities to share impact and when we do not effectively communicate? Any guesses annually how much money is lost by poor communication? Any guesses? $2.1 trillion per year lost due to poor communication. I know that's an unfathomable number. You're thinking, how the heck did we get to 2.1 trillion? Well, I put a little camera icon at the top because you may want to take note of this. Every time that you're not capitalizing on the opportunity to tell your story, these are some of the areas in which money is being siphoned from your business, from your community, in ways that you don't even realize. So 2 hours per day is wasted, on average, per employee due to poor communication. So I'm talking about duplicate work. I'm talking about people not knowing who to go to for questions, to get answers to those questions. People who are struggling, they don't know, they can't remember what was said, where to find it. There's a 50% plus turnover in organizations with poor communication cross-functionally. People want to be heard, and they want to know that when they go to you, there's an open door for dialogue, that their ideas are welcome, that feedback is welcome. And in organizations where this communication doesn't exist, employees feel stuck and they start to look elsewhere for opportunities. This is important because communication and storytelling can help to create that sense of trust, that sense of belonging. And I'm of the belief that the greatest impact that we can have on this world for those who are seeking change is to fully belong to the world. And there is no greater way to belong than through storytelling, and to create a sense of belonging than through storytelling. And if people feel that they don't belong, it's because they have not bought into your narrative. You've not perhaps made that narrative available to them. 90% of organizational transformations fail due to poor communication. So Jesse just touched on expectations not being met and what happens when there's toxicity among shareholders, leaders, team members, because there's a misalignment in the expectations. If we fundamentally don't understand what is expected of us, what it is that we are contributing to, the story has not been told clearly enough. We have not connected to the impact, to the why, and ultimately risk missing the mark on some really important organizational shifts. So I'm going to tell you a few stories of how storytelling in particular and how sharing stories, creating this sense of belonging, has created real business value. The first one being NASA. They were having an issue with on-site accidents. So what they did was they decided to kind of turn their reporting into storytelling form. They thought, if we make these reports on how people are getting injured at work more accessible, more engaging, perhaps more people will read them, and ultimately we can prevent some accidents from happening. So by turning their reports and the entire reporting system and communication strategy into a storytelling opportunity, they increased readership by 39%, which ultimately reduced accidents by 76%. So by approaching, the reporting system with a storytelling lens, they were able to get people to take more responsibility of their health, of their team members, and ultimately reduced the time that people were missing at work, keeping them safer. Lakeland Regional Health was suffering from an incredibly poor patient satisfaction rate. They were at 35% satisfaction. Patients did not feel seen. They didn't feel heard. They didn't feel like they were being cared for particularly well by the staff. So instead of, and I'm going to go back to, I think it was Don, you were talking about the push and pull, right? Like, we cannot push information onto people. We have to kind of pull them into a story. So instead of pushing on them, we need to treat them better. We need to be more kind. We need to be more patient with them. Instead, what the CEO did was took every opportunity, every town hall, every recognition of each staff member, and said, you guys, I got to take a moment to recognize those who treated our patients so well this week. And he told these moments of impact, these impact stories. He created these opportunities where he was able to pull people into the story and say, this is what happens when we treat people kinder, with more patience. And ultimately, they were able to, with no rule, no policy, increase patient satisfaction from 35 to 95% by simply integrating storytelling into the way that they ran their team meetings and that they kind of managed the micro moments of communication through the day-to-day of their business. Finally, I'm going to tell the story of Airbnb, because storytelling and really echoing the stories out to the people who need it most and creating that sense of community can drive serious revenue. If you remember, 2016, Airbnb launched a campaign that says, "We are Airbnb," and they share stories of the guests and the hosts that basically populate the platform. And by sharing real-life stories of the people who were using their service, they were able to generate over 300 million new guest arrivals, resulting in a $1 billion revenue increase from 2016 to 2017. They positioned their platform not just as a service, but as a community and as a place to belong. And this is only possible through storytelling. So you might be thinking, hang on a second, why are we talking so much about stories when this is a public speaking workshop? Good question. Because sandwiched between death and heights is glossophobia. In other words, the fear of public speaking. It is the second greatest fear that people have and that are preventing leaders like yourself from having the impact that you can have. So when we think about, actually, quick show of hands, who has a fear surrounding public speaking? Okay, just a few. Done. That's surprising. Hey, look at that. Okay, we've got a few hands. Interestingly, this doesn't always manifest as a typical fear. We won't necessarily think, oh, I'm afraid to get on stage. These fears, they're a little more sneaky. So among the CEOs that I've worked with, and I hear this a lot, especially with the CEOs in this room and in this community, fear can look like, you know what, I don't really want the spotlight on me. I'd really rather this be about the company. Show of hands, anyone said that, feel that? Keep your hands up, you might get tired. Trust me, it's okay. This is about creating a sense of community, folks. Keep your hands up because I want people to feel that they're not alone. Number two, I don't like public speaking, but my board or my leadership team or someone else is really important, is insisting that I have a greater presence. So I guess it's necessary. Hands up. Anyone who's face that reality. Third, yeah, sure, I'd love to get on stage, but I don't know what I'd say. Show of hands? I'm seeing the same few hands go up. Or maybe I know exactly what I'd talk about. I just don't know how I'd say it. I don't know what story to tell. Yeah. So they're not fear in the sense of stage fright, but these are things that are blocking you from achieving your impact, from getting your story out, from creating that sense of community. And you're leaving serious money on the table if this remains your narrative. So what is storification? It is really the concept of threading the needle between your vision, your values, and your voice. We heard some great tips on how to tell great stories, but what stops a lot of us is not knowing which stories to tell, not knowing where to start with them. And the single greatest thing that I can offer you today that will allow you to walk out of here and amplify your impact instantly is knowing which story will connect most with your audience and being able to identify what that story is. We heard about a story bank. It is so essential to start that. If you haven't started it yet, don't panic. We're going to start it today. But we get through these types of events. I've seen so many people take notes and take pictures, and I think we have great intentions of revisiting this Friday, next Monday, when we're home. We're not waiting, folks. We're going to do this in real time. We've had some really great tools, but now we're actually going to integrate, reflect on your notes on the things that you've taken pictures on, and really look at, revisit Dawn's presentation and look at the book that's on the table and understanding who is my audience? How do I connect with them? Think about what Kate said, right? And really, are you a mindset? Are you in that stage? Mind shift, mind share? What stories can you tell from this place? This is not a tomorrow homework. We're going to start thinking about this now. So if you think, wow, this is a great question to sit with later, we're going to speed that up and we're going to tell some of these stories because they are the things that can cascade. What we identify here today are the things that you can then bring to your pitch deck, into the way that you onboard new hires, into the way that you're communicating with shareholders, the way that you bring yourself to market. As a CEO, you have a responsibility to carry the brand forward, to bring yourself forward in a way that is in alignment with the company. We want to make sure that they're getting the same experience, that the touch point that they have with you in this meeting is the same experience that they're going to get when they attend perhaps your own conference. So we have an opportunity here to build out a story that is really relevant to the values that you hold, to the vision that you carry. And today we're going to take the opportunity to take it one step further and carry it through your voice. For those who are brave enough, interested in sharing the stage with me, we're going to have you share some of these stories, get the practice, leverage the collective wisdom of the room, and see how we can elevate those stories in real time. So 5 principles of storification. Some of these are going to sound familiar. They're not entirely dissimilar from what we've heard before. So if you're thinking, oh, this rings true, we've heard some of this today, double down on that. I think you're going to notice that there are some themes which I'm really excited to hear are kind of resonating talk over talk, because it means it's especially important and we're not doing enough of it. The first thing, Dawn did a great job of setting the stage here. Every great speaker begins first by listening. He mentioned how his approach is to send out the survey ahead of time, right? Get to know, do a little bit of research on a few people just to orient himself with who it is that he's going to be speaking to, how he wants to move people forward and into action. So keep in mind, this is a today activity. So we're not necessarily thinking out in the future. When you have the opportunity to break out into pairs, which we will soon, be sure to listen. Be sure to share what it is that would be most valuable for you as that audience member, because that's going to help the one who's in the speaker seat make sure that the information that they're giving and their ability to storify it and turn that information from merely communicating, transferring knowledge to an experience that ignites change, hyper relevant for you. So every great speaker begins first by listening. Make sure you know who it is you're talking to and how you can be most relevant and effective for them. Second, stories are about expressing, not impressing. We heard this earlier with Ben. He was sharing some really impressive people who he's worked with, some great things that he's achieved. And honestly, I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember any of them. What I remember is how he made me feel. What I remember is his experiences of those moments. What I remember is him standing over here and him talking about this woman who was so loved and so adored and so ill, and she had one nurse on one side and the other nurse on the other, and she was putting one foot in front of the other just to get to the dining room table and say, "How was your day at school?" That's what I remember from Ben's talk. So it's not about impressing. You can share things that are impressive for the sake of expressing their significance to you, how they've moved you into action with the intention of moving your audience into action as well. Third principle of storification, your story answers three main questions: what, so what, and now what. What being, what is the story about? How does it pertain to the needs of the audience? And this is where point number one is going to be incredibly important. If you get to step number 3 and you've skipped step number 1, then you've missed a huge opportunity to deliver impact. So what is this story about? Perhaps equally important, why are you uniquely positioned to tell this story? So when you're thinking about the story you want to share, make sure that it is not only relevant to the person that you're sharing it with, but that it is uniquely yours in some way. So what? What is this story about? So Dawn mentioned that sometimes the call to action, I think, is one of the things that people miss most. In my experience with this community in particular, the so what is actually where people fell short most in the keynote auditions, in the top keynote. How many times am I going to say keynote? Top keynote auditions, there we go. This was, I think, really overlooked by this community in particular, and so I think it's important to bring it to your awareness. There were incredible stories. There were actually really strong call to actions, but what was missing in a lot of cases was the connective tissue, the so what. How do I take this information and apply it to my own story and within my own business? How do we make this tangible? Particularly for a group of business leaders who are looking for tools, frameworks, structures, something that they can use of your experience to integrate within theirs. So the so what is, what do I do with this? So really, when you think about that unique experience that you've lived, try to extract about 3 points that you can transfer tangibly to the person listening that they can integrate to either expedite their path to success, that they can perhaps avoid some of the hardships that you've faced, or ultimately just learn what you've learned differently. They get to opt in to that lesson and keep it in their back pocket when they need it. And now what is the call to action? What do you want them to do with this information? Stories for a story's sake can be entertaining, but if you really want to catalyze change, you need to be leading them somewhere. So think about that ahead of time. That would be the call to action. When you pick this story, know where it is that you're leading them to, and make sure that you do a good job in doing so with the so what tools that you offer. I can't emphasize this one enough. It's not about what you say, it's about what they hear. I'll elaborate on that. What they hear depends on their ability to make sense and assign meaning to the information that you're sharing with them. This is why there's a picture of the iceberg, because what happens so many times is that we start to tell the story and we just give the tip of the iceberg. We just show what's sitting above the surface. When I ask, okay, what kind of knowledge do you want to transfer? What kind of change do you want to inspire? What story do you want to tell? I think what happens is that we default to the ending of the story that we're at now, and we take for granted all the hardship, all the adversity, all the changes, all the choices, all the sacrifices that were required to make our current situation possible. So we're trying to get people excited and catalyze change, move them into action by giving them just the tip of the iceberg, when we have to go beneath the surface and share how we got there. If we're trying to encourage people to move from point A to point B, we have to remember where we started. We have to remember what point A looks like. We have to go beneath the surface and meet them where they're at. One of my favorite examples of going beneath the surface, because so often when we start talking about stories and building a story banks, when I'm working with CEOs just like you, what is often told as the initial story is seldom the story that we actually end up telling or where we land as the most impactful place. So I've asked Kate permission, because this is one of my favorites so far. So Kate, who you just saw, CEO of 1% for the Planet, we're building out her story bank. And we're talking about leadership. We're looking to build a signature keynote talk. We know that she wants to speak to impact-driven business leaders who are intent on using business as a force for good. So how do we empower this current and next generation of leaders to really lean into this responsibility? So I said, Kate, well, that's great. What's your approach to leadership? What does that look like for you? What does it take to be a great leader? And she's thinking, she said, well, for me, what that looks like is I've always kind of like jumped before I've been ready. And okay, great. How do we help others jump before they're ready? If we take a step back, what skill is required? How do we get people feeling like they too can jump before they're ready? Anyone else feel like they've leapt with 2 feet in before they knew where the heck they were landing? Yeah. So I'm asking her, Kate, this is great. How do we take your lived experience and help people take that leap before they're ready if this is something that you feel is fundamental to leadership? And she said, well, it's really been about exercising courage in the micro moments, just acting with courageous intent, even when I'm afraid. And I said, okay, so would you say that the opposite of courage is confidence? Have you developed confidence in this moment? And she goes, no. I'm like, come on, Kate, where are we going? Look, you keep me on the edge of my seat. She's like, the opposite of courage is not confidence. It's integrity. I thought, oh, that's juicy. Walk me through your thought process. Tell me, what does it mean to have integrity? How does it connect to your concept of leadership? This process is a little messy, okay? This brainstorming process, building a story bank, it's not meant to be linear. If it was so easy, we would land on these stories instantaneously. The process is in understanding, is asking questions, is getting to know your audience, and really, in her case, understanding, what am I trying to get from this? Because now I have this insatiable curiosity. Help me understand the connection between integrity, courage, and leadership. Because I'm emotionally bought in, but I don't see it yet. And then she brings me visually into this, quite frankly, horrific sounding experience of a Nordic ski trip. You've been on a few scary outdoor adventures, it seems. Goodness. So she embarks on this ski trip, 25 kilometers? 50 kilometers. See, this is what I'm saying. It's not what you say, it's what they hear, right? This is a detail that actually is rather insignificant. What registered to me is, I would never do this ski run. It is too long. I am not interested. But what I remember is that she gets through the first loop, and it has been the hardest, most treacherous hill of her skiing career. I might embellish a little bit, but interject if that's the case. And she sees a bunch of people who have tapped out after the first loop, and it would be so easy to join them. And she's looking them at the side, and she says, you know what? I don't want to do this second loop. I don't want to go through it again. There was a second one, and she's thinking, it would be so much easier. No one would judge me. More than half the people have opted out anyway. If I just go sit on the bench, enjoy some hot chocolate. I said, well, what did you do, Kate? She goes, well, I don't remember exactly how you had the box of Fig Newton cookies, but she ate an entire sleeve of Fig Newton cookies as she was looking at the ski hill, and she thought to herself, We will always have the opportunity to opt out, but we don't always have the opportunity to opt in. And I was like, damn, that's good. And I had goosebumps. I remember thinking, that's what integrity means to Kate. It's about showing up when no one's watching, showing up when it doesn't matter, showing up when you know that you have been tasked with something greater than yourself and you need to build courage in these micro moments so that when the stakes are higher, you've flexed that muscle. Then we had a story to tell. So it's seldom the story at the tip of the iceberg is my point. So by understanding your audience, by expressing, not impressing, by answering what, so what, now what, and really understanding that it's up to you to make sense of the meaning that you're giving to the story, because we don't want our audience filling in the gaps in a way that isn't our intention, right? Then we risk losing them, or we've missed the mark in allowing ourselves to get them to the call to action. So this is enough of me speaking. We have a good few minutes. We've got about 20. I want to make sure that we have some time to share. What's going to be really impactful for everyone in the room is, again, leveraging the collective wisdom of the crowd. So you're going to have time to be in pairs, but I want a few people to come up and share, and I want us to take this opportunity to give feedback. This has been one of the most meaningful experiences of the top keynote speaker auditions. The greatest feedback that Kevin and I got time and time again is we actually don't have anyone who is qualified or willing to give feedback and to identify my blind spots. Not on my team, not in my personal life. So you are among peers who understand your realities. You are among coaches who are highly skilled at giving feedback. And you're in a room of storytellers. So this is a great opportunity to put some of these skills to the test in real time, get that feedback, become aware of these blind spots so that when you leave, you're going to be able to pull these stories through in a really, really meaningful way. So we're going to get into pairs. You're going to find a partner. And there are going to be two responsibilities. One person is going to be the storyteller. The other person is going to be the interviewer. And this will be your role. So we're not going to switch. So once you choose this role, this is going to be your role for the entirety of the activity. The storyteller, you have the responsibility to choose one of the three following scenarios. You're either going to choose an experience of failure that was quite significant in your life and the lessons that you learned from it, or you can choose to talk about resilience, a personal experience that has really shaped your resilience as a leader and explain the impact that it has had on you. Or you can choose to share a little nugget of wisdom that defies conventional wisdom about being a CEO and why it's important. And I'll take a little step out of the presentation just because since Ben spoke about liminal space, I've had a number of you reach out and grab me at the coffee hour and be like, what is the concept of liminal space? Arvin, where are you? Yes, he's like every chance, he's like, can you tell me what it is? And it's relevant here because liminal space is a transitionary space once you've left what was and you've not yet arrived at what's next. So a physical liminal space comes in the form of this stage, a staircase, a bridge, ultimately getting you from point A to point B. We have emotional liminal spaces. We have philosophical liminal spaces where we are very much in transition. And the reason I bring this up here is because oftentimes those periods of transitions hold the best stories. So if you think about a time where you were on the cusp of a significant change or you entered the space of the unknown, it probably holds a lot of great stories as it pertains to failure, resilience, and wisdom. So get into pairs. You'll have 5 minutes. And know that whoever chooses the storyteller role may be invited on stage to share their story. So if you're accepting that role, you're accepting the fact that you may be called on. Get into pairs and we'll reconvene. Hey everyone, we are going to welcome our first storyteller to the stage. Does anyone want to volunteer to share their story? We've got Sarah. All right, come on up. We're gonna can we get a mic? Yeah? Thank you for participating, everyone. Thank you for volunteering, Sarah. Okay. All right, everyone, we're gonna bring our eyes back up here. Before we get into the story, what was the process of being interviewed? Did your story change over time as the questions were coming in? What was that like?
No, it was great. And we have a story, but we're going to Saudi Arabia on Wednesday and have to present a part of a story in a very different format.
Okay, well, I'm gonna step off stage and I'm gonna leave it to you. So we're gonna give you 3 minutes, okay? We're gonna start counting down at 7. And I'm gonna be a stickler for it because we need some time to give some feedback. So Sarah Jensen, co-founder of Hugh and Grace, everybody.
Let's go, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm co-founder, co-CEO, and mama to Hugh and Grace. Our story, my husband and I have been married for almost 23 years, but we struggled with unexplained infertility for 14 of those years. And during that time, we went to world-renowned doctors all across the country. No one could ever figure out why we couldn't get pregnant. It was our 6th round of IVF. I'm sobbing, the best doctor in Beverly Hills, saying, what else can I do? I was an ultramarathoner. I stopped running. I hate needles. I was doing acupuncture. And it was then when he said, what chemicals are you spraying around your house and what skincare and wellness products are you using? Because that can impact your hormones. I hadn't put 2 and 2 together. During all my rounds of IVF, I was prescribed a hormone cream. I rubbed a small amount on my skin, get my hormones tested the next day, and my hormones would spike. And saying, oh, if that had the capacity, the ability to impact my hormones in such a real way, other things can too. The amazing, best part of the story is my husband's sister volunteered to be our surrogate, gave birth to Hugh, and my sister called a year later and volunteered to be our second surrogate, so gave birth to Grace. There are miracles, they're wonderful. The name Hugh means heart, mind, and spirit. Grace means goodness, generosity, and love. At the time, my husband was operating a multi-billion-dollar family office in Beverly Hills. I had my MBA from University of Southern California. I was working with our billionaires, helping them raise transformative gifts. So I said, Ben, how do we pay forward what we were given? And I say this, a little more context. So we have a lifestyle wellness brand that promotes hormone health. And think of hormone health benefits as mental clarity, reduce stress, reduce inflammation, better sleep, all the things you want and need. And so we said it goes on and around our body, impacts our hormones positively or negatively, and we offer solutions. What's interesting is we're being invited, we're scaling fast, we're fundraising. We're actually flying Wednesday morning. We've been invited to be delegates to go to Saudi Arabia to meet with government, royal family. They do not believe in surrogacy. So I'm trying to figure out how do we, they have a whole vision for Saudi's 2030, the wealthiest country in the world. They care about hormone health. They also care about female empowerment. And we're multi-channel, but one of our channels is direct sales. And so we have thousands of mostly female entrepreneurs who can sell our products and who can go and earn a commission. So they love the fact that we offer female empowerment and have a really elevated learning platform. They love our products, they want to bring us there, but they don't believe in surrogacy. They believe in family. And so I'm just trying to figure out how do we relay this story, because they're super interested in what we're doing. And I can't blow this experience to go over, but also that's so crucial to our, so it was really interesting because you've worked in the Middle East for 3 years, and it's like understanding, I have to know my audience. But so it's just very interesting because it's such a real vulnerable connection. And if I can't talk about that, I'm just trying to figure out how to relay.
Okay, round of applause for Sarah.
Wow.
That was quick. That was quick.
Love it.
Do we have anyone in the room who has experience in needing to tell variations or versions of their stories and adapt them for audiences? I see your head nodding. Can you share some tips with us?
I was buying a company from a family that was incredibly Catholic, and they found out that my company donates to Planned Parenthood, and that almost killed the deal. And so I had never in my mind would I have imagined that someone would kill a deal because of this, but it was such a strongly held belief. And so I had to think about how I was really going to handle this. And I had a story where I was raped when I was in my 20s, and luckily I was on birth control, but I had to really grapple with what would have happened if I wouldn't have been, if I wasn't lucky enough to have that option. And so I had to make that decision in the moment was I going to share this incredibly vulnerable story with them? Because otherwise I wasn't going to get the deal. And I really had to think about, like, am I compromising myself? This is not something that I would go and tell perfect strangers. And I decided that I was going to. And so in that moment, I had to live my values. I had to be really honest about why supporting women's reproductive rights was such an important aspect to me, and that this is more than just about abortions, right? This is about being there to support, because my doctor was at Planned Parenthood, and she really helped me through the experience. And by making that decision to tell that story and to be really vulnerable, it kept the deal alive, and we closed on it a few months later. And so, you have to I believe that you have to stick with your story, and that, again, that story can be really compelling. And so that was just an experience that I had, where I had to, change, where I was all going in with just business, like, this is a really good deal.
Yeah.
No one else is going to buy your company besides me. Like, all of a sudden it didn't matter, because there was a moral conflict. And so I had to pivot and be very vulnerable and have courage to be able to share that story, and it made a difference.
And thank you for sharing with us.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Now I don't know if I get on stage or get off stage or.
So thank you. Thank you for that. So for me, I'm often in spaces where I'm the only one. And what that then requires is I don't always get to tell the story I want to tell.
Would you like to come up here?
I don't know. Do you?
Why not? It's in the spirit of storytelling. This is your story. Your name again, sorry?
Elaine Rasmussen, Social Impact Now.
Yes, Elaine. Here we go. Here, I'll
And
step
Connect
back.
Up Institute, Minnesota, Twin Cities, reppin'. Whoop, whoop. Okay. So I was just sharing that I'm often, especially in finance, the only person who looks like me in the room. I'm usually the person who only has the same gender parts as me in the room. And oftentimes, I do not have the luxury of picking and choosing the story that I want to tell. I have to tell the story that's going to get to the objective that I'm looking for. And so what that then requires is me of still being authentic and finding a story that is important and that's valuable, but the larger objective of reaching my goal. To the point that was made earlier of, like, what's the action that I want people to take? What's the decision that I'm looking for? How am I looking to change someone's heart and mind through my story, as opposed to telling the story that's most important to me? So that's something that I found valuable.
Thank you. Oh, you can bring it. I don't know who gets it next, but it'll go with you. Yes, Tristan.
So my company happens to be selling across the political spectrum.
Come on up, Tristan.
My company happens to be
should have brought
selling
you on stage
products
earlier. I'm so
across
sorry.
the political spectrum, from the reddest of red states. I mean, to give you a sense, I was in Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago, to the bluest of blue states, Massachusetts. And I'm selling to governments on both sides. I'm selling exactly the same product. They're sitting diametrically opposed to each other in terms of the way they're thinking about this. For example, in Oklahoma, they would say that they are buying our product because they want to know where fraud is in the social welfare system. In Massachusetts, they want to help more people. So when it comes to telling our story, the way we really organize ourselves when it comes to this is really thinking about what's core, what they have in common, right? And then we shift to their particular interest, create that alignment between that core that is common between all the groups, but also their interest. And that's really the way we can express the way we sell our stuff.
Thank you. Seems like you got a few people to connect with, Sarah. Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Sarah. We're at time, so I'm just going to bring us back to this slide. If you have any fear, any resistance, any hesitation to speak publicly, you're speaking in public every day anyway. I encourage you to shift your perspective. It is not a matter of getting on stage. It is not a matter of impressing. It's about expressing ourselves. The stories that were actually very impactful were, in fact, answers to questions that we had, probably not even the stories that you shared at your table, but when we heard from the people who came up who can help Sarah, they listened to what she needed. They expressed their own lived experience. They answered what was relevant, so what they did, and now what, something that she can apply to help in her situation as she plans for her trip on Wednesday. And it wasn't really so much about what they said, so much as it spoke exactly to her needs and our collective needs, is really tuning into, like, what did we hear as an audience? We heard that they were very in tune, that they gave very practical, heart-centered advice, and that we're able to assign meaning. Some stories may resonate more than others, but for the ones that struck a chord with us, we're not going to forget those examples and the tools and the advice that they gave. So my invitation to you is now to take these stories, perhaps it's the one that you thought about in your pairs, or as you think about storifying your impact, think about how these stories are pulled through in the way that you communicate with your employees. Again, little camera icon up here. This is going to be some take-home homework for you. Think about how you communicate with potential hires. Think about your job description, your onboarding experience, every touch point that your team has with you. Are these stories, your vision, values, and voice, pulled through the entire employee journey? Are these stories being leveraged to really move your shareholders and your partners into action? Have they been communicated with your clients and prospects? And finally, are you using them to really amplify your brand positioning and messaging as the one steering the ship at this company? Fun fact, this is, the brand proposition and messaging is something that when speaking with Don after going through, I got a sneak peek at his 10 storytelling tips before y'all did today. And I was most impressed by the reversal of I to you. I thought that was really different. I really love that, and I saw how I could immediately apply it. And then I went over to Don's LinkedIn and I said, hey, Don, there's an opportunity for us to apply your own tool to your online presence, because a lot of his posts were, I was here this weekend, and look who I was with and what I've done, and all great updates. But after pointing that out, we were able to take the very IP that makes his impact so profound and pull it through his virtual presence so that every time someone is engaging with Don, they're getting the same experience. So this is where I encourage you, once those stories are told, don't just let them live and die on the stage or in the room that you're in. Really allow them to cascade with every area. And if you had fun, if you're interested in being a top keynote speaker for 2026, I encourage you to apply. The link is right up top. You can connect with me. I'll be around until Wednesday. Thank you guys for participating.
Amazing, Sam. Brilliant. Brilliant. Great work. All right, everybody. We're a little bit over time, so I won't be long.